The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Praise to you, Lord.
After making the crossing to the other side of the sea, Jesus and his disciples came to the land of Gennesaret and tied up there. As they were leaving the boat, people immediately recognized him. They scurried about the surrounding country and began to bring in the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. Whatever villages or towns or countryside he entered, they laid the sick in their marketplaces and begged him that they might touch only the tassel on his cloak. And as many as touched it were healed. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
We start reading now from the book of Genesis. So our first reading, just Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. We started from there, and we'll read through Genesis for quite a while, like we did through with the book of Hebrews. So it's interesting to kind of get your mind in those texts and ponder them throughout these next couple weeks. And this first creation account that we just read from, the resounding theme is after God created, it says, and God saw that it was good, right? You know, God created, separated the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. Just in our reading, it's repeated about 4 times. So it causes one to think, well, what does it mean that something is good? Like philosophically, what does it mean when something's good? And I always just like to say something is good when it is properly ordered. So when something is ordered to the right ends that God created it with, it's good because it's doing what it's supposed to do. And so that we see in the natural world, that's fairly self-explanatory. The sun comes up and sets and all that, it's good. But I think what happened then with the fall is then things got disordered. So now they're not inherently good. They don't just incline to the good. We, including, don't incline to the good. We have a disordered desires and then some. So the idea is to get back to good one way or another. So then Jesus lands on the scene, God, right? And part of his business is reordering things, like reordering things to their proper good. So even we see him doing all the healing, like in our gospel today, that people brought the sick to him and stuff, and he's, that kind of sickness and that lameness and all that stuff, it's disordered in a sense. That's not what God intended creation to do, but because of the fall and the fallout of the fall, things go that way. Sickness, cancer, death, all that stuff wasn't intended. So God and Jesus is reordering it back to good. So that's the business he's about. So we see it today, and we see it all throughout the Gospels. And it is kind of interesting that when you kind of step back and look at the kind of the climate of the day when our Lord was there was a lot of chaos, maybe even more so than now. Like not only all the sick and the crippled, okay, I can understand that, but like the demonic and the people, these guys being bound in chains and, them bringing a little child to him that's got an evil spirit, and it's throwing itself down on the ground in front of him. Like we don't see a lot of that today. And I had a buddy said that he thought, and I get behind it, that, prior to Jesus landing on the scene, the world looked a lot different. And I don't doubt it. I mean, I don't doubt objectively it was more chaotic, right up until Jesus. And then God, taking on our flesh and landing on earth, like just that in and of itself reorders a lot, the death and resurrection, bam, things are objectively getting back into their right place. But I think it's safe to say we also don't see the fullness of that yet. There's still plenty of disorder in our creation. And so await the fullness of that reordering to the good, when our Lord comes again. New heaven, new earth kind of stuff. So now we're in between, but I don't think as bad as it was prior to our Lord. So, we await that, but we can also participate in that now. And I think in cooperation with God's grace that he gives us now, we can grow in virtue. And what is virtue? It's the firm and habitual decision to choose the good. So instead of always forcing ourselves to choose the good, like I know what it is, I have a tendency not to do it, so I got to choose it. Eventually, with God's grace, it becomes natural. So my inclination to the good becomes natural. That's a virtue. So in the meantime, we can work with God's grace and grow in virtue and already participate in good now, which is when things are properly ordered, when our lives are properly ordered, then to naturally choose the good. So that's kind of where we find ourselves today in salvation history, but I think it's kind of good to position us in our readings too with Genesis, okay? Kind of getting back to the fundamentals. But then what it means that our Lord, when he lands on the scene, that he's all about reordering us and reordering us to the good.